Well, welcome to the Livestock Podcast, sponsored by the University of Tennessee Forest Center. I'm Bruno Dreira, Center Director and Forage Specialist here with the University of Tennessee. Today, I have Dr. Katie May with me, our beef extension, UT Extension beef specialist with the Department of Animal Science, for another podcast here, Dr. Mason.
Yeah, excited to be here. Excited to talk about one of my favorite things, grass, and how we feed cattle.
Yeah, I think that today is going to be a very, forest-driven one. We are pleased to welcome here Dr. Patrick Kaiser, Professor and Director of the Center for Native Grasslands at the School of Natural Resources here with our beautiful University of Tennessee Institute of Agriculture. And we have been trying to you on this podcast for a while. I'm glad we got you here today. Welcome to the Livestock Podcast.
I'm glad to be here and appreciate getting together with y'all. And I'm like you, it's a good time to sit around and talk about grass. Not everybody, but us, right?
That's right. Always a good day to talk about
Yep.
grass.
And our farmers.
Yeah.
Our beef cattle farmers like to talk about grass, and that's why we appreciate it.
That's right. Yeah. So to get us kicked off here, just tell us a little bit about your background, how you got interested in native grasses, kind of your transition up through this position in UT.
Yeah. Well, it's a good question. I'm not even sure how I got interested in native grasses. One of the things that's always interested me is I have a background in natural resources. And so I'm interested in things like water quality and wildlife populations and healthy ecosystems, whatever all that means. But I've also always been interested in farming and forestry. And so I like to see a productive farm, but I want to see that productive farm be one that gives back to our environment a whole lot more than just beef, or if it's forestry, just saw logs. And maybe my North Star, so to speak, is my conviction that we, all of us on this planet, but us particularly that work in this field, are stewards. Our farmers are stewards. We're borrowing this land from our great grandchildren in a sense. And I just think it says something about our ethics, our morality, our quality as people when we take an interest in keeping, as a famous conservationist once said, Aldo Leopold, keeping all the parts, right? And so, yeah, I want to see a thriving cattle farm, but I'd love to hear a bunch of bob white quail standing on the and I'd love to walk down to the creek right to that back right to the winter area, see clear water. So that's kind of a passion that brings me here. And native grass in particular, we have studied tall fescue and Bermuda grass and orchard grass literally for about a century now, and that's good. I'm glad we've done that. That's what we should have done. But we've also kind of ignored this gift that the good Lord set under our feet several millennia ago, at least. These grasses that are our own grasses, and what can they do for us? So a lot of the questions I've been asking is, can this fit in a forage system? And if so, how? What does it contribute? What can't it do? Right? Let's not be silly and say well, every grass out there's got its shortcomings, right? Orchard grass.
Oh yeah.
Well, fescue has toxicity, on and on.
Yeah. So let's start with this. What are the main benefits? We will get into the challenges later.
Yeah,
what are the benefits of native warm season plant?
Yeah. So several things, right? So one, that they're native to really all of Eastern North America, east of the Rockies, the species we talk about. And let me just real quickly. So we're talking about things like big blue stem, Indian grass, switchgrass, Eastern gamma grass. Those are sort of the main ones that we look at in the forage context. But they're native, so they're well adapted. You can't take me to a site in the state of Tennessee. I can't grow one of these grasses if we can grow grass there. And I can probably grow it better there than we can a comparable introduced grass. So adapted, right? Part of being adapted is they have, generally speaking, very low nutrient demands, right? So I can grow these grasses on a pH of 5.0 with no P amendment, no K amendment, and they're just as happy as they are otherwise.
We certainly don't have any places like that.
No, there's none of that.
All of our fertility is perfect.
Now, nitrogen, they like nitrogen, but not to the degree that Bermuda grass does.
They respond well, right? I think
They respond.
Yeah.
So low input, they're perennial, so they last. And guys, I'm sorry if I get off on a tangent here, but perennial grasses are so important to our forage systems, right? Annuals are wonderful tools, but perennials are going to save you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And they're going to be there every spring. They're going to be there every fall. So they're perennial, they're low input, they're well adapted, high yielding. These grasses, roughly speaking, crank out, depending on how you want to count, 50% more than our tall fescue to twice as much as our tall fescue on a per acre basis. And forage quality, y'all know this better than I do, but and telling our listeners, our perennial warm season grasses and really our annual warm season grasses have higher fiber content and lower nutritive value. If I test my native grasses at the standard forage lab, they're going to come out looking so-so. But when we put them through an animal, they ring the bell. So we see these rates of gain that are disproportionate to what the lab is telling us. So I've got this forage that's high yielding, long lasting, low input, well adapted, that puts the pounds on the animals. And being a summer grass, they are remarkably drought tolerant, even more so than our Bermuda grass.
And I think it has a lot to, I think that's to me one of the most important points when we are talking about those natives, because the last survey we put together in Tennessee tell us that we feed hay for 143 days on average.
Mm.
Some of these 143 days, something around 2 weeks, happen in July.
In the summer.
So we do have farmers in Tennessee that are still feeding hay on the peak of the summer when fescue goes dormant. And I'm here. I never told that we need to get rid of fescue. I never told that. But fescue will not be there when it's hot and dry, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we do have the capability to grow older plants that will be very nice within that whole system perspective.
Mm-hmm. Just a little anecdote. Out in Kansas, where these same grasses grow that we're talking about here, the scientists out there have documented that the photosynthetic activity of big blue stem at 117 degrees Fahrenheit was more than 90% of its peak. Its peak occurs in cooler weather. It doesn't want to be 117.
But up to that,
but the point is, well above 100, it's still growing.
Yeah.
And our cool season grasses can't. The good Lord didn't design them that way. They can't do that.
Handle that, right?
And that's not what they're there for. So we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. And what I'm saying is, I'm in a rowboat, and I've got. Has anybody ever been in a rowboat these days? There's two oars in a rowboat, right? And if I only use one of them, have you ever been in a rowboat?
You're going to go in a circle.
You're going to go in a circle. And so we got two oars. I've got two legs. Y'all can't see it. I use them both when I walk. Why not use our cool and warm season grasses together in a rational way?
Tools in a toolbox.
To optimize our city. Boom.
Yeah, one of the way that Bruno talks about it is building a forage menu, thinking about that menu throughout the year and how we can fill in those gaps. And so when we're talking to producers about, filling out that menu and selecting options for the warm season, what are your recommendations for, creating that summertime menu? How much of their acreage should be devoted to that? How does that establishment kind of process look?
We were talking earlier today, Bruno, about researchable questions. Mm-hmm. That question, to my knowledge, really hasn't ever been studied, and it'd be incredibly challenging to give a firm, hard science answer. But there's a couple ways I arrive at my answer to that question. If we've got a 9-month grazing season, which is what we aspire to.
8-9 months out of fescue, right to me.
Of those 9 months, 4 of them are arguably this thing called summer. Mm-hmm. And by the way, it comes every year, right?
Turns out,
it's come this year too. So we've got 4 out of my 9 grazing months. That's getting close to what, 40%, 45%? Mm-hmm. Another way to look at it is if you look at historical records of the mix of warm and cool season grasses, if you go up and down the United States from north to south, we were always in a part of the world where warm season grasses dominated, right? And Bruno, go into a fescue pasture in the state of Tennessee and tell me how much broomsedge you see.
Oh yeah.
How much Johnson grass,
crabgrass,
foxtail, things we like and things we don't like. Yeah. They're telling us something. And you walk into your pasture and see how much warm season grass is out there, and that'd be a good rule of thumb. But to sum it all up, if someone were to ask me, I'd say about 40%. I will also say if you have dedicated hay ground for less nitrogen, more tons per acre at a lower cost per ton. And again, Bruno, you know this, Katie, you know this. We're not suggesting anybody go convert a healthy, vigorous, productive pasture. We're talking about where you've got a pasture that's fallen to pieces that must be renovated, new ground, ground that's coming out of row crops, those markets swing. Those are the opportunities where you inject this into your system with a background goal that maybe 40% is pretty reasonable. So that's what I tell folks.
I think that at least the farms that I've been visiting Tennessee so far, if they have at least 20-25% with warm season plants, the system is already different, right?
Yes.
The complementarity that we have in between cool season perennials and warm season perennials, already changed the game during the summertime.
Yep, absolutely.
But I promise that we will talk about challenge a little bit.
Yes,
too.
absolutely. Yep.
And not everything comes in a beautiful package. Sometimes we need to deal with whatever the native of those plants and
Real
talk a little
life.
bit in real life. It's not easy to establish, right?
Yeah.
And we cannot think that we will use it right away. So what's your take on this? You have been doing this for almost for the time of being in this planet, man.
Yeah. So I've told people that list of benefits, and sometimes I think people are listening. And I talk, one of the things I love about it being an extension, we get to talk to people who have got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years of experience. They're smart people that are paying attention. And I know y'all both know this. I go talk to a group of farmers. We're learning from them.
100%.
Maybe more than they're learning from us. We don't
100%.
say that. But so when I tell them all these good things, I'm assuming what they're thinking. Come on, Kaiser, what's real? So here's what I tell you: the real downside to native grasses, 95% of the problem is about establishment. That's it.
Get that
If I
foster
could
going.
plant
Yeah,
these like
once you get 'em
cereal
there.
rye, ain't nothing to it. Now I will say a second challenge is grazing management, and Bruno and both y'all may have worked with the novel fescues and orchard grass. We got to be a little more paying attention in our grazing management with those than we do, say, hot fescue or Bermuda grass, right? Natives require a little more attention. It's not insurmountable. Folks, I've done it, right? I mean, come on. But the establishment is the real challenge. And the reason that is a challenge is you're dealing with a small seeded species, although not necessarily much smaller than tall fescue, that is slow to germinate. We're talking 3 weeks to germinate, right?
Yeah.
And because these plants have these legendary deep root systems, getting back to the drought tolerance, what they do, that they are distance runners, not sprinters. And so what they are doing is they're driving that root system 4 feet in the ground their seedling year. Everything about this species, these species, means that they are extremely vulnerable to competition. And so when we say it's difficult to establish, that's not really true. What's really true is that they are very vulnerable to competition. So if you don't do a good job of weed control when you establish them, you're going to get this is science talk, but you're going to get your hiney kicked.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, and we don't have a bunch of selective grass herbicides, right? So if you have fescue coming on that pasture and orchard grass and wherever crabgrass is there is nothing that we can say, okay, I want to kill everything but my native.
Well, actually, there is for big and little blue stem, side oats, and what am I missing here? Indian grass.
Indian grass.
We actually have a chemical. The chemical is a Mazapic. It's sold under 2 labels, Plateau and Panoramic. Same concentration of the active ingredient, same application rates, same material. Basically, it's off patent, so it's generic now. But that actually works really well for crabgrass, foxtail, seedling Johnson grass. It's really rough on cool season grasses. The one grass it really is weak on is goosegrass.
Okay.
And we will see some problems with goosegrass. Now, I mentioned that chemical, and it really solves a lot of problems for us. But switchgrass is not at all tolerant to it. We can't use it with switchgrass, and we cannot use it with eastern game grass. So we do have some chemicals, but Bruno, back to the main point, is that they're very vulnerable to competition, and you have got to do a good job, in my mind, of agronomy. You got to be a good farmer. And if you mind your P's and Q's, same kinds of things you might do to plant novel fescue, that you would seeded Bermuda grass, a millet, or not a millet so much, but crabgrass. These things with small seeds that need high quality seed beds, those are the principles. It's not really any different. But that's the challenge, and it's a legitimate challenge.
When we're talking about establishment, what are, I would say, the main issues you have been seeing throughout your career in terms of, is it weed the main problem? Is it seed depth or timing of the year? How do you put those things together to get a perfect planting?
So which are the biggest culprits?
Yeah, and what are your biggest tips to get it?
How do you get past
100%? Yeah.
So
how do you?
So 95% of stand failures are because of weeds.
Okay.
That's a little bit of an exaggeration. Maybe it's 80%, 20% is because of drought.
Because we plant then in May. What would be a recommendation for you?
I'll get to that, but regardless, I've seen terrible droughts in April when we plant. I've seen terrible droughts in July. So regardless of when you plant, we have a window. Drought And folks, I can't plant corn in a drought. I can't plant
I know.
millet. I can't be plant cereal rye in a drought and succeed. But as far as what would you do, you can plant anytime from, I would say, the 1st of February to late July. You've got a huge planting window.
Okay.
There's different things to consider there depending on when you choose. You mentioned it, Bruno, shallow seeding, small seed, switchgrass, 300,000 per pound. It's like Ladina clover. Big blue stem Indian grass is about like fescue, maybe orchard grass along in there. Shallow, we plant those shallow. You need to have good seed soil contact. You need to be shallow, and you need to have the exceptional weed control. And this can be done no-till. It can be done conventional. But whichever path you take, one of the biggest traps people have, let's use the example of no-till. They go out in the spring, they spray their ratty pasture they're trying to renovate and convert, and they come back 2 weeks later and it's all brown. Go get the drill. We're going to plant. No, 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 no. That pasture has a Pandora's box of weed seed in there that you just turned loose by virtue of killing the old sod.
Seed bank is there.
And it's basically like, I don't know, taking a bunch of mean children out of your way, putting the street gang in your way, right? I mean, you're going from maybe not good to really, really bad. And so what you have to do is be prepared to think in terms of probably 3 cycles of weed suppression. Ideally start in the fall. If you've got warm season weeds out there, and I'm thinking of Johnson grass, I'm thinking of Bermuda grass especially, start in August. And if you have those warm seasons, hit it again in October before dormancy, and then come back the following spring. And if it's warm seasons you're fighting, wait till it's warm enough for them to express themselves in May,
Then
hit
you
it the
kill.
3rd time. Then you plant, right? There's recommendations out there. You don't plant after June 15. Throw that in the trash can. If you have a high quality seed bed and it's July 15th and you see rain coming, I've got a drill parked here and a sack of seed there, I'm planting. And I've gotten some gorgeous stands that time of year. Now, as a rule, if I have my choice, I would plant in March. Okay, dormant season, because the way good Lord made these plants, that they go to seed in October, November, shatter out, lay in the ground over the winter, germinate in the spring. So let's mimic that.
Okay.
So I would go in there in March, but again, you have to have done your weed control. And by the way, you cannot go into an existing sod and drill this in. It ain't going to happen. We can't even do it with crabgrass, right? In a fescue sod.
It's tough, yeah.
Unless you got a really weak place in your fescue.
Yeah.
So you've got to think in terms of a real high quality seed bed. So.
Yeah. And thinking on the management side, so let's say we do have a good stand of, whatever mix we've put down or maybe gamma grass. Do people use gamma grass here as much as they do the mixture of Indian grass?
I think gamma grass is less common than the mixture of big blue and Indian or switchgrass.
Sure. Yeah. So thinking about management of that, you said that grazing is a little bit different, right? So what are some of the things that people need to keep in mind from a management standpoint from grazing? And then thinking about that year-round system, what do we do kind of in the off season in those native warm season pastures?
Great questions. So grazing management, really what it comes down to is there's one simple rule, and that is to recognize that these are tall growing plants, right? And so the range of height. So if we're trying to graze tall fescue, we typically would tell people 4 to 12 inches, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. Okay, these are tall growing plants. We don't want them 4 to 12 inches. We want them, roughly speaking, depending on which species you're talking about, 15 to 30. So think of a sorghum Sudan hybrid or a perennial millet, except a perennial plant, right? And so that's rule number 1, is understand that the lower threshold is much higher, the upper threshold is much higher. And as you start to look at these grasses, it'll kind of come obvious to you. So just recognize that if you're rotational grazing, you need to turn in maybe when it's hip high, if you have heavy stocking density. But when it starts, I would always tell people, from your hip to your boot, if you can find the top of your boot, you can find your hip, you can manage native grasses. As long as you keep that leaf, and this is true of any grass, leaf surface area is what we're really after.
Sure. Yeah.
And if I leave that photosynthetic reactor out there, I'm good.
Don't be too greedy.
Don't be too greedy.
Yeah.
There's a guy who I think you've interviewed on this podcast. I should hate to call his name, give him any credit. Dr. Hancock. Dr. Dennis Hancock. We all love Dennis. And Dennis, I heard, and I don't think it's original to him, but he used to, at workshops, tell people it takes grass to grow grass.
Yeah.
There's a little common sense for you.
Yeah.
So that's the main principle, is know that it's a taller growing grass. In terms of management, another really important thing to recognize is these grasses, because they put on, think about this, they put on let me exaggerate just a tad. It's really a nitrogen difference, but these grasses nearly put on double the tonnage of fescue, but they do it in half the time.
Yeah.
What does that tell you? They're going to grow fast, right? And so the rule of thumb is in the spring, when those native grasses are ready to graze, forget you got any fescue. Get the heck onto the native grasses, because if you don't, you're going to have a train wreck, right?
It's going to be ahead of all this all summer long.
They're going to get over mature. You'll lose so much benefit in terms of nutritive value, and your fescue will be okay. But the day they're ready, I don't care if you think you got 3 weeks of grazing left on your fescue, or 1 week or 6 weeks. Just get up and leave. That is absolutely critical. I guess, Katie, the other part of your question
was the winter. Yeah,
was the winter. So there's 2 or 3 things you can do in the winter. So these grasses will be productive grazing, depending on where you are in Tennessee, from late April, and which species we're talking about, till late September.
Okay.
That's kind of our window in which they could be available to you. But in September, their growth is really slowed down. And in October, they start to turn brown, just like Johnson grass will, or, our summer annuals and so forth. So you can, one option, and I've talked to producers that feel this way, is I don't care. I'm getting the benefit I want out of them in the summer, so I'm not worried about it. I don't care what they do in the winter. Just ignore them. That's an option. A second option, and people in our part of the world, their eyes cross when you tell them this, but you could graze these things when they're dormant. The protein's not there, but there's some energy there. And it's like out in the Great Plains. We got a family farm out there, and everybody grazes corn stover, right? It's not the best forage in the world.
No, it needs to supplement, but
it's 30 or 60 days of free grazing,
Yeah.
right? Plus a protein supplement. Same thing with these dormant native grasses. You can get away with it. A third thing you can do is you can plant a winter annual into them. I tend to discourage people from doing it early in the establishment cycle of the natives. Wait till the natives are well established. The other thing I would caution people is that I may not do every acre every year.
Sure.
Because even Bermuda grass can get slowed down by winter annuals if you're not managing it properly.
Yeah.
Winter annual. So, my preference would be to use something that plays out early, so that the native grasses break in dormancy and seasonal growth isn't inhibited.
Yeah.
So rye is, if you learn how to graze it, is a great spring and winter forage, but you can use any of the cereal grains. I tend to discourage people from rye grass, just because sometimes a little bit of rye grass is a lot of rye grass.
It'll go a lot.
it is.
But I know people who have done it and are satisfied with it. But the point is, you can, and you can put some diverse mixes in there if you're big on the brassicas and so forth. No reason you couldn't do that. So those are your options.
Good. And I think also, getting to the end of this conversation here, Pat, one of the benefits I see as well, and we have been talking about this, is you may end up producing so much tonnage during the summertime that you may also need to make silage or baleage or use it in a different way, right? The numbers are not that bad for the summer.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, again, blue stem hay, we had some hay we made one year about middle of July, which was probably about 3 or 4 weeks too late. And we baled a bunch of stems. The guys that fed it came back looking for more. They said, "Where'd you get that stuff? We want more." The cattle licked it up. Now they picked out the stems, right?
Yeah.
Cattle aren't dumb. But the point is that leaf tissue is still good. The other side of this story is when they pulled a forage sample on that, 7.5% protein. You'd say, "Oh man, throw this in the ditch, right? Or save it to the end of winter when you've run out all your good hay." I talked to a guy the other day who got some blue stem hay, and he said he won't grow anything else. His cattle walk past everything else to get to it. So the point is, it makes a very good hay, even if it's over mature. Switchgrass, not so much. If switchgrass gets away from you, you're going to be disappointed in the quality.
Biomass only.
Yeah, you'll have a lot of biomass.
Yeah.
So for switchgrass, at least in East Tennessee, I'll just throw a date out there, and we all know dates aren't really the thing you go by. It's the stage of plant development. But May 25th, if you're not out there with a mower, you ought to be getting kind of anxious with switchgrass, right? If you cut it then, so it's an early boot stage, you're not seeing any seed heads, you're going to be very satisfied with that hay. And it's going to test, 12% pretty routinely. And again, animal performance on these hays is a lot better than any of the tests will show you, just like with the grazing in the summer. So.
I don't have a ton of experiences with switchgrass. We don't grow that much in Brazil, but all the panicles and brachiaria that we use there, they're pretty much, in the same.
And guinea grass, do you all use
guinea grass, exactly.
It's a switchgrass.
What I learned with those plants is as soon as you pass boot stage, everything is so fast and you lose quality so fast that it doesn't work, right? So if you decide to go and take that route, grazing management is critical. You
is.
gotta keep your eyes on that thing, and you
Yep.
gotta graze it or harvest it. Otherwise, you're
hurting yourself.
You were hurting yourself.
Yeah. And that's far truer for switchgrass than it is the blue stem Indian grass, but the principle's the same for both of them. And as you say, really any of our summer grasses. So,
Yeah.
but, yeah, absolutely. Good forage if you, and people haven't siled all these, native grasses.
Silage, yeah.
Baleage, I guess maybe is
Baleage.
what I should say. And the ones I've talked to, and again, the ones that don't have a lot of air in there are pleased with it. And the ones that cut it on time are pleased with it. You know, it's just like any other baleage. So,
Yeah. Yeah. And similar to any other, that message translates across all grasses, right?
Yeah.
it really,
If we could do a better job with grazing management, period,
yes,
in our tall fescue systems,
absolutely.
it would be a benefit.
You know,
So,
Katie, one of the things I think I've been trying to do with native grasses is sort of demystify them over the past 20 years, because people either think they're irrelevant or junk or don't belong here, or maybe they think they're special and do all kinds of magic things. It's like, this is a tool in the toolbox. And the principles for establishment, for management, for grazing, you adjust things, but
the
it's not
the
really
foundation
different.
is the same, right?
It's not really
Yeah.
that different.
Yeah.
So.
Man, that was great. Great conversation here about pastures in this livestock podcast. Dr. Mason, any final comment on this?
No, I love talking about grass. Obviously, it took me back to my grad school days, thinking about overseeing eastern
remember
gamma
that.
grass with
Beautiful
rye
games.
and red clover, and then did a lot of sampling in a mixed blue stem and Indian grass pasture. So
No,
lots of long summer days.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, hey, I appreciate the opportunity, and fun to chat with y'all, and hope it's
Awesome.
of some use to our listeners, and they can certainly track us down if they've got questions, right?
That's awesome. Pat, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to have you here at the Livestock Podcast. I hope you guys liked that conversation, and we'll see you guys in the next Livestock Podcast. Thank you.